Victory Lab here at Lakeshore. So she's a local product. She's now working in the office of Peter Milchin, the councillor. So she's knee-deep, maybe it's neck-deep in politics these days. She'll have lots of useful things to say on many of these subjects. Amber, I hand it over to you for the evening.
Thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. It's always so important for us to come together and have these conversations. I always like to reference the quote by Margaret Mead that, it really does take a group of committed individuals from a community to make anything happen. Because working at City Hall, it's very interesting to be on the other side of the table, but at the end of the day, whether it be working in a community or working at City Hall, it's very clear that the only thing that makes things happen is people putting pressure on leaders and having these conversations and coming up with solutions. So I'm so happy to see you all here and grateful that you could join us. We have some amazing people here with us today that are going to talk about really important topics. But before we get to that, one of our amazing young people, Shantea James, she is a poet and a dancer, a friend, an activist, a leader. She's an amazing young woman who I'm very proud to know and work with at SEYA. And she has a poem prepared for you all tonight. So please welcome Shantea.
And my poem is called Youth Are the Future. If I didn't make a difference today, I probably did yesterday. If not then the day before. But I have made a difference at least once in my life, and I will not be told maybe tomorrow, I'm probably here, you lost your chance. What I don't understand is how society keeps on changing, but we continue to blame the youth of today. But how can you blame the future when it was you who made our society this way? It is time for us youth to try and speak out, because I guess society does not know what we're about. See, what I'm trying to say is we want to be heard and not told we shouldn't say one word. We're here to make change and not be blamed. So give us a chance, because we understand, and who knows what youth need more than youth. And stop telling us what we need and let us tell you what to do. For youth are labeled and criticized and then pushed down like a Word doc you minimize. For a community should have opportunities for all, not just for adults, but for youth too. We shouldn't be told we don't understand, and when we're also here to exchange and create change. What we should understand is that I may not be the big man, but youth have a voice and deserve to be heard. I want to make a difference in my own way and be told I helped shape the new generation of today. I don't believe the future is predestined, because it's all up to what we do today. If we want to create change, it takes a few minds, and all we got to do is take the time and listen. It's about creating new leaders and future speakers. Youth are the future, and that is of today. So don't blame your problems on the future hands, because I don't understand how that's the right plan. For we didn't make the choices, we just grew up in them. So why does society blame the youth of today and not just give us the chance of the day? So it's time to embrace the youth of today and realize we are the future, so let's create change.
Results of cuts to public funding for post-secondary education, which I'll abbreviate as PSE, by the federal government. Today, the public funding is about 50%. It's down from 75 to 80% just over 2 decades ago in Canada. So the impact of this is really significant. The increase in tuition, the huge increases in tuition, and that are rapidly increasing, have caused post-secondary PSE to become unaffordable for many low-income and middle-income Canadians. And low-income families are less than 50% likely to participate in universities as those from high income. And Stats Canada's most frequent barrier to PSE was financial reasons. So higher education does, while it does allow for better employment and wage opportunities, education is not necessarily accessible for everybody equally. Those who can afford it, or those who qualify for OSAP, which is the Ontario Student Assistance Program, will still accumulate debt and interest on that. And also with the increase in unemployment rates, there's complex and layered issues with post-secondary education. So low-income families are socioeconomically already at a disadvantage, so this cycle continues. Education is not being made accessible, and so they're not able to provide or afford a more stable life financially that way. Along with other barriers to PSE, previous poor experience with the education system, lack of guidance about PSE if a parent did not attend college or university, the distance, relocating, programs and trading spaces that are linked to a specific market, that are linked to a specific labor market demands, and the higher the debt, the less likely of graduating in some cases. So poverty is also a huge, poverty and low income really can affect someone's access to PSE. And this impact on society as a whole, there's a student debt in Canada of about 15 billion, which means students are working several jobs at a time, and they're not necessarily stimulating the economy. And we know that education really dictates our socioeconomic well-being in the long term in terms of how much money you make, your overall health and well-being, and financially affording adequate housing, transportation, nutritious food, out-of-pocket health costs, etc. And also, being a more educated society really stimulates the GDP, so our gross domestic product. And in the past decade, those with post-secondary education significantly benefited our GDP in Canada. So it's really, really important. It increases our social status, it increases voting in some instances. If you have a higher education, enhanced skills, you're more engaged, and in some studies it also shows that you're more happy, more satisfied with life. So my experience, I'm still paying off my debt. Almost done. I got a full-time position just about a year and a half out of university. I did depend on OSAP, and OSAP and the 30% off tuition rates for those who qualify through OSAP. Those are very downstream approaches to the financial aspect of post-secondary education. So some of the solutions that I propose. A national policy on post-secondary education, because it doesn't exist, so that there can be a kind of cross-the-board fee for all colleges and universities at a fixed rate, so they can freeze it and start lowering it. We need to advocate to the federal government to increase funding for public education. We're actually at a lower educational funding in comparison to other OECD countries, which is at an average of 84, and we're at 75.
20 seconds.
Yeah. So I have a lot of other potential downstream and upstream approaches to looking at how to reallocate funds to post-secondary education. 20 countries in the world provide it free, and those are great models to really look to and try and shape and create our own models. We can increase taxes on corporations. We can do a lot of other things with the money that's out there, so speak with me later.
Thank you so much, Salome. Let's get Salome. So again, we really want to encourage you guys to get more deep into these topics. So if there's anything pertaining to the subject that Salome just covered that you want to tweet at us or jot down your questions, again, we're going to have our breakout sessions, and that's when you're going to have an opportunity to share your thoughts, opinions, feedback. And just for some guidelines, as you guys can see, there's some questions here. We provided them for our panelists as sort of a guide for their speeches, but these are the questions that will also guide the conversation in a breakout session. So first, post-secondary education, cost, debt, and value. The questions are, what is the cost debt reality for post-secondary students who don't have family financial resources? And what do the stats tell us? As Salome kind of alluded to, and she'll be available in the breakout session for more information if you guys have questions at that point. What is the impact on low-income students in society as a whole of the high cost of education? I think you did a great job summarizing that one. And then again, and what I think is the most important component of this conversation is what solutions can we offer? And I think, again, that's really what we want to get out of tonight. So get those brains working, and hopefully you guys have some good ideas around that. So our next speaker just joined us, of course, fashionably late, Mr. Fresh. Dwayne Abbott is a youth leader at street level. He's been involved with the program for a number of years and has worked his way up from a participant, a leader, and now runs the entire space. So it's wonderful to have him here. He also does programs throughout the community, including basketball, recreation, and that type of thing. So tonight, Dwayne is going to be talking to us about recreation, the antidote to drugs and crime. Is it the antidote to drugs and crime? So, Fresh, take it away.
Hi everybody, how you doing?
You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, I'll be very real quick, okay? So yes, you did say Freshie, or Fresh, that's actually my nickname. My name is Dwayne Abbott. We'll stick with that for now. Alright, so like Amber said, I'm going to be talking about recreation and is the antidote to crimes and drugs with youth, right? So for me, like Amber was saying, I've done recreational programming honestly for the last like 16 plus years. Even back in Rexdale, where I originally was from, I ran adult drop-in basketball programs. Also did a recreational program with youth from like 7 to 12 years old, I believe. And then came down here and started doing the same thing but with older kids. So I've been in recreational programs for a while and see what it can do for people and how it helps. I want to start off with talking about recreation as a whole. Usually when you think recreation, you automatically think basketball, sports, but other stuff with recreation includes dance, arts, as in painting, maybe drawing, or photography. All that's recreational stuff too, right? So it's not just sports and physical activity. It can be other stuff, other outlets for youth. I also want to talk about, well from there I want to talk about kids using drugs. Usually when kids use drugs or commit crimes, some of the reasons are for those reasons is poor family dynamics, lack of support at home, a traumatic incident such as maybe someone dying, maybe someone just being ill in their family, such a traumatic effect on them, so that might lead them to a life of crime or using drugs. They could probably possibly use drugs as a depressant or somehow it's an outlet for them to like feel better, get away from the situation that they're in. So that's some of the reasons why kids might use drugs or go to crime. Another reason for crime and drugs with youth is probably the biggest thing for me is boredom. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think a lot of kids are just bored at home. So are bored on the streets, have nothing to do, or they don't know where they can go or get access to recreational programming. So what do? They end up doing stealing or some kind of crime or doing drugs, recreational drugs, right? Another reason youth might do crime or use drugs is also just to get that family dynamic. Because with a gang or with your group, people usually do crimes in groups, and with that you usually look for some kind of comfort, some kind of group to feel like you belong, right? So definitely that's one of the reasons why I feel youth would go to crime or do drugs. Talking about myself, continue talking about myself with recreation. For me, when I was growing up in Rexdale, there's a lot of things going on around me. People getting hurt, people robbed, and all kinds of things were going around me and with my friends and stuff like that. And for me, recreation helped me a lot. My mom put me in soccer. She put me in, actually, she put me in ballet when I was a little kid. Shh, don't tell nobody. But she put me in programs. I was really young, probably before I was 11, and I did soccer, and that kept me out of trouble when my other friends were getting in trouble. And then later on, my mom couldn't afford to pay for soccer. So as I got older, I started to get into more and more trouble because I had no outlet. You know what I mean? I played basketball, but I didn't play organized basketball. I just played pickup basketball. I played basketball on my team, but like only for so long because I was getting in trouble, right? So that kind of goes to show you what recreation does for people and helps them out and guides them, right? There's actually an Ontario study, a 2-year Ontario study done a couple years ago, and the study was based on families and their children and providing recreational activities for them. So the first group was a group of families where they, with the help of the YMCA and with the help of other agencies, were able to help them access recreation activities and find subsidized activities. In the other group, they were told to find it on their own, find their own recreation. They were told to find their own recreation activities, and they were subsidized either. So in the end, the result of that was the first group. The first group basically.
10 seconds.
I'm gonna be over that. That's what I'll be a little over that.
Okay, fine. You can have 30 more seconds, but let's wrap it up.
But yeah, so in the end result, the group that got help with the subsidized programming and recreational programming, those youth were found out to be more socialized. They were more leaders. They had more leadership skills. They had more developed skills in general. So obviously, with recreational programming, it develops your leadership skills, it develops team building, you develop sound decision making. So if you have all these points, you're most likely not to be deterred to do crime or drugs because you have all these life skills and skills to make good decisions.
Thank you, Fresh. That was amazing.
The project was a charity founded in 2010 when a student named Jack Windler took his own life in his first year of university. What the Jack Project wants to do is we want to make conversations about mental health. The real mistake lies in looking at it as us versus them. Essentially, those that struggle and those that don't. But that's not how it really is. Mental health, just like our physical health, is something that we all have in common. In fact, it's a spectrum. Sort of like the weather, you might say. It's not black or white, and if you think about the weather, there's sunny days and overcast days, and then there's the full-on hurricanes and rainstorms. And we can all relate to that. In the same way, mental health is a spectrum. Some people might feel as though they have good mental health in the sense that they have generally positive thoughts about themselves and the world around them, but sometimes we all face a little bit of struggle. Mental health challenges are common and we all face them. But for a small subset of individuals, these challenges might be so severe, have a very high degree of suffering, and a long enough duration to be called a mental illness. But remember, we're all on that spectrum together. And that's not to say that someone with a mental illness is playing on a different team, and as well, they can recover and go back to that sunny day. And as well, we have to start thinking about mental health as a part of our overall health and well-being. You see, none of us have any problem with saying, I'm not feeling so good today. My stomach hurts. I might go home. I might see my doctor. In fact, we encourage our peers and people around us to take care of their health in the sense that if you found out someone you knew was trying to eat healthier or get fit, you'd be fully supportive of that. And what the Jack Project envisions is a world where we can talk about mental health in the exact same way. Because like I said, they go hand in hand. You can't be a physically healthy individual without being also a mentally healthy individual. So that being said, what the Jack Project looks to do is to create conversations about mental health on all scales. So in some ways, this could mean having a conversation about someone when you think that they're struggling, or maybe reaching out when you need help. And at the same time, there are also these larger conversations that can happen in communities and across the country. So for example, the Jack Project wants to encourage youth to reach out when they're struggling. Whether or not, you might not know if it's something so severe that's a mental illness or something that's just what you're going through. The important thing is, you're probably not going through it alone. In fact, you are not going through it alone. So reach out. Find someone you know and someone you trust who you can talk to about this. Chances are they'll be more than happy to help you. And that's the thing, you have to believe that help is out there. People do get better, and you have to believe that that will be the case for you as well. That being said, you can also have a conversation with someone who you think might be going through something. If you notice that some of your friends or one person have a change in behavior and you're not so sure, it can be just easy enough to say, hey, I'm worried about you. Is something going on? Can I try to understand? And notice that I said, I'm worried about you. It's not, I'm worried about your grades, I'm worried about, your future. It's just about you, the person, and how you're feeling. And as it turns out, a conversation that simple and encouraging someone to seek support can actually save a life. Jack Wingler wasn't willing to reach out when he was struggling because of the stigma, because of fear, because he didn't know where to go. And we want to make a world where no other youth are ever feeling that way. But that being said, there are also bigger conversations, like the ones that we're having here today. You're sitting in breakout sessions, sitting in this room right now, and the thing is as well is that this doesn't just have to be a conversation for the experts, for, the doctors of the world. Youth can be right in on that conversation too. Because youth know best how to relate to other youth. And as we see today with the SEYA crew here, amazing things are possible. So the Jack Project really wants to encourage youth to be brave and be bold. Start these conversations with your peers and within yourself, but think big. You can start these conversations in your community as well. There are opportunities that we've tried to set up for youth that even allow national scope.
30 seconds.
So that being said, reach out, have a conversation, start small at dinner today, or dream big for the future. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And underemployment and the growing crisis that we all find ourselves in. So, Carol, particularly.
Thank you very much, Amber, and I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's your Speakout. My only qualification to be here this evening is that I care about this issue. I have for a very long time. I can remember sitting in Paul Martin's office before he was Prime Minister, before he was Finance Minister, before he was even a politician, at Canada steamship lines and saying to him, this country needs a leader whose vision includes Canada's young people. Since then, I've written dozens of columns on youth unemployment. This year alone, and it's only April, I've written 3, and there's soon to be 4 by Friday because I've already half written Friday's column. I consider it one of the most important social and economic issues of our time. I can't call it the biggest single crisis because I worry a lot about the widening gap between the very rich and the rest of us. And I fear that you're going to end up on the wrong side of that divide too. What you don't need to hear from me, a member of the incredibly lucky baby boom generation, is a lecture about your plight. I didn't live through it. When I graduated, employers made room for young people with drive and talent. They considered it their responsibility to train us for the specific job they hired us to do. That doesn't happen anymore. I've spent a lot of time talking to graduates who can't find work and thinking about what went wrong. I don't want to bore you with reams of statistics, but I will highlight a few of them to provide background for your Speakout. Last month, which economists called an extraordinarily good month for young people, the unemployment rate for Canadians 15 to 24 was 13.6%. That's double, almost double, the national average of 6.9%. So what that means is 1 out of every 7 young people who's actively searching for a job can't find one. And even the lucky ones who do get work are likely to be underemployed. Half of them work part-time. Many are stuck in dead-end fast food or retail jobs, earning the minimum wage of $10.25 an hour, and if they're still in school, even less than that, $9.60 an hour. What's more, these jobs seldom have anything to do with their skills or their dreams. What I hope to do in my remaining few minutes is spark your thinking about what you can do. You may not be old enough to vote yet, but you can make your voice count. Over the next 18 months, there will probably be 3 elections in this community, 1 municipal, 1 provincial, and 1 federal. If there's one message I would like to leave with you, and I'm sure Desmond's going to deliver it much more forcefully than me, is please don't sit on the sidelines. Don't turn away in disgust. Toxic as these campaigns are, they're the only opportunity people get to change the status quo. Your generation deserves answers to some crucial questions, and no one can ask them as well as you can. Let me suggest a few to get the conversation started. If I were you, I would ask every candidate seeking federal and provincial office why Canada is bringing hundreds of thousands of temporary foreign workers into this country to do entry-level jobs. There's no shortage of Canadians willing to do this work. And your generation needs those opportunities to get work experience and move up the ladder. If a politician tells you how much his or her government is spending on youth employment, ask for results. The amount of money they spend has very little to do with the number of jobs they create or their willingness to shift the focus from my generation, which has dominated the job market for almost 50 years, to your generation that needs an economic foothold. Ask your MP, and if this is Etobicoke Lakeshore, it would be a conservative, why his government delayed eligibility to old age security until the age of 67. All that will do is keep boomers in the workforce 2 years longer, blocking your entryway. Ask your provincial MPP, who I believe is a progressive conservative, why it's fair for your generation to take on a heavy debt load to get an education that doesn't lead to a job. Ask him whether he did that. Ask every person who's running for office why governments at every level are spending millions of dollars to crack down on young offenders when good kids who stay in school and play by the rules can't get a break. I'm sure you'll think of lots more questions. Use them at all candidates meetings, town halls, call-in shows, buttonhole candidates on your parents' doorstep. And don't stop there. Go to your local chamber of commerce and say you'd like to have a meeting with the members. If anyone in your family belongs to a union, see if it's willing to champion your generation. I know that the United Steelworkers, for example, has a campaign for unemployed youth. Your parents, whatever issues you might have with them, care about your future. Ask them to make it a voting issue.
30 seconds.
I won't presume to tell your generation about social media. You know 1,000 times more about that than I ever will. I don't want to overstay my welcome, so I will stop there with a final thank you for inviting me to be here at Lakeshore this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. That was amazing. I think, again, all of these conversations are very much connected to one another, but I think the call to action that Carol just outlined to all of us is so important. And I think if there's anything that everyone takes home from this today, I think that that's one of the most important ones, is use your voices, because these elected officials are there to represent us and they're accountable.
I've been reading for a very long time, and whose work inspires me, so thanks. So I want to talk a little bit about engagement. You folks see the questions that are up here. I'm looking at them myself just to make sure that I don't go completely off the rails. I tend to ramble sometimes. I'll talk to you a little bit about myself first. I am a journalist, And I'm also an activist, which I think is weird to a lot of people because a lot of people see those as being very separate careers and in some cases contradictory or conflicting careers. I try to do them both. I don't really think of them as careers to make money so much as ways to express myself and to try and be the person that I want to be in the world. I write news stories and pieces about social justice issues, about people who don't have enough to eat, who don't have a roof over their heads, or whose roof is crumbling. I write stories about people who can't afford to ride public transit or whose buses don't come enough. I write about things that I think affect people on the day-to-day, and that I think that we all ought to be concerned about as people who live together in a community. I'm the type of person who has always been engaged in my community and in the life around me. I was one of those people who, I ran for student council when I was in high school and was on the student council every year. I volunteered, I was in all these clubs and extracurricular activities. It was just a natural thing for me. And so that has translated in my older life to getting involved in things like the political structure. And I actually even ran for Toronto City Council in 2006. I was only 24 years old at the time, but it was something I really believed in and wanted to do, so I went ahead and I did it. And it taught me a lot. I don't expect that anyone who's interested in their community should run for office the way that I did, should run for city council or student council in their school the way that I did. But I think that we need a broader definition of what it means to be civically engaged. I want to talk just quickly in the time that I have about three things. I'm going to talk about something at each level of government. And I want to talk about the good, and then I want to talk about the bad. Because we can't just talk about inspiration and change and being excited about things without talking about what will happen if we don't do anything at all. So first up, the federal level. I'm going to try and touch on issues that I think relate all to young people, and I would include myself. I'm 32 years old. Today's my birthday, in fact. Still a young person, as long as they'll let me in the club, and fighting for myself as well as for all of you. So when I talk about youth right now, I'm talking about myself as well. We have a federal issue right now with something called, and I'm ashamed to even use it, it's called the Fair Elections Act. It's not fair, I'm going to tell you that right off the bat. One of the things that bothers me about this legislation that the federal government is trying to bring in right now is that it is trying to restrict people from voting. Sometimes people don't have identification when it comes to voting day. There's been a long-standing practice called vouching, where you can go and vouch for your neighbor, for your friend who lives in your community and say, I know this person, they don't have identification, but they live here and they want to vote. We've been doing that for a long time in this country with no problems. Now the government says you can't do that anymore, and they're introducing a bill to say that's going to be wiped away. One of the proudest things that I have ever done in my life was when I had a job, the first job I ever had in the city. I worked at a drop-in center for young people, many of them homeless, many of them without identification. And we would let them use the address of the community center as their address. And we would write them a letter, and we would walk with them to the polling station so that they, like everyone else, could participate in democracy by voting. Now, that's one of the reasons why I think you should get involved. Because that experience was not only good for that person who was able to vote that day, it was good for me as their neighbor, as their brother, as their friend, to be able to go and do that for them.
1 minute.
Oh my goodness. Number two, provincial level. Same job that I worked at, same drop-in center. We learned that a lot of the people that we were serving in this drop-in center had issues with mental health, issues with drug addiction and alcohol, but there were not any places for them to go. I was part of an organizing group that rallied so that we could have more detox facilities for young people who wanted to get into treatment and support themselves and change the bad habits that they were into and the challenges that they were facing. That's another really good thing that helped me and helped other people. Right here at the municipal level, just last evening, I was at a meeting about police carding. This is the practice that our police unfortunately have in Toronto of stopping people in the street for no reason and asking them for identification. information that then goes into a police database. If anybody knows about this issue, you will know that the people who get stopped most often in this city are black men like myself, young black men who are stopped by the police in our streets just for walking around in their own communities. I think it's good to write about that issue and to support myself as a young black person, but to support any young person who's victimized walking around in their streets just for being there in their own community. So that's the good. We can help, we can support, we can learn. I know I'm out of time almost.
It's okay, it's totally worth hearing, so I'll give you some more time.
But what's the flip side, guys? The flip side is, what if we didn't do these things? What if we don't get involved? There is no peace if there is no justice. And to me, that's the way that it should be. If we can say to young people and people who are homeless that if you don't have identification, you're not allowed to vote, how long will it be before we decide other people and groups that are not allowed to vote? If we decide that we're not going to support people who have mental health and drug issues to get treatment, then what's going to happen to them in 15 or 20 years when their conditions worsen? How long are they going to survive? If we allow the police to make victims out of people for walking down the sidewalk in their own community, well, maybe today it's somebody who looks like me. How long before it's all of you? No justice, no peace. That's the way it ought to be. And as long as you and I and everyone in this room have an opportunity to get engaged in our community, whether it's just giving up your seat on the bus for someone, or whether it's trying to change something in government, we have a responsibility and a chance to get involved and to make a difference. So let's go out there and let's do it. That's it.
Thank you so much. Let's give a big loud round of applause for our whole entire panel. So really quickly, I just want to acknowledge a few people in the room, and then we're going to get into our breakout sessions, which I hope you guys are all really excited for. I know I am. First of all, I just want to acknowledge, speaking of leadership and city councilors, Russ Ford, who I'm sure most of you are very familiar with, is with us today, and he's going to be running for Ward 6 City Councilor. So. Is also with us, and he's actually going to be running for a federal level of government. So we can have a Unfortunately, our local city councillor sent his regrets, along with our provincial representative as well. So we definitely want to support the people who support us, and it's super important when our leadership are engaged. Right? PC Chu, who's also running for provincial member of parliament if the election gets called. And really quickly, Jasmine and the SEYA crew for their display out front and getting pizza out. We all love food. Shout out Michelle Weeks and the Lakeshore Arts crew for their display. Stephanie and the Jack Project had a display out in the cafeteria, and Humber Recruitment, Risha Tony. So thank you so much, you guys, for coming on to support our event. The more the merrier when it comes to these types of things, so we really do appreciate the support. So now we are going to get into our breakout sessions. We have some facilitators and some note takers, as well as some ushers that are going to bring us up to the various rooms. So we'll go topic by topic. Again, you'll pick your two favorites, and it'll be 20 minutes in each. If I can get our ushers to come stand up at the front, Jeff and whomever else is going to be ushering. I think we need about 4 of you guys. Maddie, if you don't mind helping, whoever's there, you guys can just stand up. So for the first group, we have post-secondary education. Solomon will be the expert in the room. The facilitator will be Michelle from Lakeshore Arts, and the note taker will be Irina. So if you guys can follow Jeff, if you want to put your hand up, you guys are going to head over to the cafeteria. So if I can get the facilitator and the speaker with Jeff, if you'd like to chat about post-secondary education with Solomon, you're going to follow them. So just to remind you guys, the next topic is drugs and recreation. Then we'll have youth mental health and under unemployment. So, next facilitator. I'm wondering what you guys are doing.
You have the list?
Yeah, I have it. So if you're interested, I'll just ask you to kind of make your way towards the back, and again, I'll get all the facilitators out. Ken will be facilitating. He's a jobs coach, and he will be with Dwayne. And our note taker for that group is Danny. Come on up. And you guys will also be in the cafeteria. So those first two groups, you guys can head over to the cafeteria, post-secondary, and drugs and recreation. The third group is mental health. The facilitator of that group is going to be Darnell, our incredible trustee, jack of all trades, Darnell, along with IPAR, who will be the note taker. And you all will be in room 217.
All right.
So if we can get our usher studying and after graduating are continuing to work multiple part-time jobs. So the idea of underemployment is a trend. We see that happening often with people and recent graduates. There's, again, no opportunity for stable and secure work. Financial aid. The idea was brought forward that we need to speak up to our government. Ontario has one of the lowest rates of support for post-secondary education. And many of you probably followed the news, and there was a huge movement in Quebec where they were trying to raise the tuition costs, and they were like, you know what? Not happening. And they protested, and they took it to the government, and they mobilized their peers, and they had an impact on the government and on the cost of their education. So here we have a little idea, Quebec movement in Ontario. Why not? So that was one of the common themes that came out. OSAP issues, there seems to be a large gap with OSAP. Where came up with one of the ideas that was brought forward was why don't we turn these loans into grants so that we don't have points. Some of them were pressure, family, school, work, bullying, family, that's a family already, oh well, chemical imbalance, schoolwork, sports, social networking, fitting in just itself. Also, expectations and friends. You know, they may seem self-explanatory, but I believe elaborating in why is part of the big deal, the reason why it affects us in such a way. Well, they all have one thing in common, is that each of them adds something to you, something that you think that people expect you to handle so perfectly, as if you are some superhero like Superman or whatever, where you're able to do everything in a snap. What people don't understand is that we are not expecting you to change the world in a blink of an eye. We're expecting you, try and make a difference, try to do something good that would benefit you. If you finish school, it won't benefit me. I'm not going to be the one getting more money in my paycheck, or so on. It's all for you. If you want to be able to put yourself further, go ahead. But if you're going to be stopped by little things as if, are they going to accept me? Are they going to appreciate what I'm doing? Little stuff that add to anxiety, depression, that is all affecting you, and it should be your job to say, I need help. But keep in mind that it is a two-way street. If I am asking someone for help, I expect someone to be on the other end saying, I will help you. Same vice versa. If you're saying, I am willing to help, and everyone's like, yeah, I don't need it, then how are you going to make a difference? It's give and take, pretty much. And then the second question is, are there available resources? Well, I guess I would do the second question.
Okay, so we had a little poll, and I didn't exactly get to count how many people said no or maybe, but there were 5 people that said yes. So, but I think there were more people that said no than yes. So clearly we can conclude that there aren't people that think that these resources are adequate enough for this and for just for people to talk to. But we did come up with several sources of guidance at school and other places. LAMP, at a psychiatrist, Kids Help Phone, to a social worker, 911, friends and family, doctor, teachers, and also 211, which we discovered today that is a public helpline, public health helpline. But we also covered that in order to see a counselor, you need to wait for a while, and to see a psychiatrist, you could wait as much as 2 years. And if you need to wait, but you really if you really wanted to talk to someone, I guess there's no one that's really there for you as fast as you need them as friends and family, and you never know who you can trust. And we can, and for how should we,
So that leads us to the third question, are they enough? Well, think about it this way. If I have to wait 2 years to get help because I am feeling overly stressed or I'm feeling anxiety and I have to wait 2 years, we all know that's a long time. That means that there's not enough people out there looking for it, or there's just not enough places to go. Now keep in mind that even if we do go to these places, how can we trust them? If we cannot trust our own friends and our own family with our problems, how are we expected to trust someone that we just met that day and say, this is my problem, help me? Just because they have a degree shouldn't really mean anything. You should be able to feel comfortable in your own environment. You shouldn't have to go out of your way where you have to wait those 2 years or whatever, how long. It should just be simple as going to the living room and saying, Mom, I need to talk. I am going through something. And a lot of people feel like they're just going to say, well, it's not important, walk it off pretty much. But that shouldn't be the answer. Just as the wonderful lady over there mentioned earlier when she said, mental health is a lot like physical health. For example, if I get injured and I'm like, I cannot feel my arm, is someone going to tell me walk it off? No, they're going to get me to the ER. I'm not going to have to wait 2 years to get help with my arm. So why should mental health be different? That's what I personally think, and I honestly think that a lot of people need to be more aware of that with the question and start coming up with an answer to how to fix that. So, as I said, if you're going to go to someone and you're going to trust them, how is it going to be easier to trust than your own friends or your own family? And you also have to be aware of who you're surrounding yourself with. If you're going to be surrounding yourself with people who are going to give you situations where you're going to be full of depression or anxiety, where you're going to think, are they going to accept me? What if they don't? Or maybe they don't accept you and you're going to be trying so hard to fit in. I personally do not think it's the right way.
That's it.
Okay?
When we were going over actually we had 2 groups, and they were very interesting groups. We had one that was primarily youth, pretty much all youth, and then we had another group that were adults, and they were able to give their perspective on youth unemployment. So we'll go through some of the questions. The first one was, what is the nature and impact of youth underemployment and unemployment? Now these were referring to 2 separate subjects here. Unemployment is what is usually captured in your statistics when you read your newspapers, when you watch the news. But underemployment is something that we should recognize as well. There's a lot of people in the community, youth, that are working, and they're working 1 shift a week after they achieved a university degree or a college diploma. And that does not pay the bills in most cases, right? So I just wanted to go over that. The first question, so it's lower tax base, so we were looking at that and we were saying, what is the nature? Lower tax base, lower wages, more work, youth become dependent, expectations are raised, less discretionary income, which I just went over. We looked at foundation of life skills is lost, debt load and the pressure increases, and high anxiety, which goes hand in hand with debt load. Okay. So So this is also part of one. So limited income, debt load, survival mode. A good point that youth brought up in our session was the fact that they feel that their youth is extended because of this. So that's actually the impact of being unemployed or underemployed or unemployed. They stated that if you do not have the money to pay your debt load, then you feel like a child. You still feel like a child. So you have an extended youth, you feel less responsible, you're depressed, and there's more pressure on your parents and guilt felt by the youth due to this fact. So we'll go on to the next question, which is, given the unemployment level amongst graduates, is there any point of going to college or university? My name is Kenneth Handy. I'm from Humber College Community Employment Services. So being as part of Humber College, I always encourage youth to go after a post-secondary education. However, we look at these statistics and people are not getting jobs. They come out, and I've seen people that racked up as high as $80,000 in debt from post-secondary education, and there was no prospect of a job. So in this case, given that, is there any point of going? Well, there's too many obstacles people had mentioned. There's a lack of interest, time, and money. People are not analyzing their strengths, so they're entering a program and they do not know what they're good at, and then they just keep going through with it, and then at the end they discover there's no job available. Need for more resources to focus the direction. So someone had brought that up, that we need more resources. Number 3, why do we tolerate the enormous growing gap between low-wage earners and senior executives? And what can be done? So why do we tolerate it? Youth have mentioned that there's no choice. Who do you know? It's about, or actually they said it's about who you know. Opportunity to grow. They do not see the potential. Compete. So we were referring to competing, how the competition level has risen. So the competitive level of candidates applying for jobs. So you have, youth is only one aspect of the job market. So we were referring to newcomers to Canada, competing with youth, and they might have a higher level of education. And then we're referring to others who have worked in the field for 15 years, and they're competing with youth as well. And how are the youth supposed to get a job in that type of environment? And I received some answers stating that it wears on confidence, and some of our solutions were to volunteer and work on guarantees. So employers working on guarantees so that youth are committed towards this. And that's about it.
Workshop. Anyway, I would like to say that both the groups did an amazing job. Like, they were all really interactive for some reason. Being in that class, pretty interactive. Anyway, so we, both the groups came up with a pretty similar kind of, pretty similar things. And so the first question was, why should young people give a damn about politics and civic actions? Is it all a scam? Are they all crooks? Well, a lot of people came up with blaming the government and saying it's their job. And a lot of people said that it is our society and we are responsible for the actions that government is taking. So if we just leave it at it's their job, then what are we going to get? We're not going to get anything because we're not really inputting our opinions in the process of voting or any kind of political, game that's going on. There's also a lot of government doesn't try to engage you. That was discussed in both the groups because we were talking about youth engaging and in politics or youth engagement in general, but we never questioned why are these youth not engaging in these kind of things. It's because the government is not reaching out to us. They're not asking us, or they're never asking, what our needs are. So that is one of the reasons why the youth is not engaging, because they never asked us, first of all. They're not targeting us, ever. The second question was, why do youth vote in lower numbers? One of the reasons were a conveniency. We can't go to places like we had a discussion about how some students in universities, since they come all the way from different cities, they can't go and vote in their home city because they're here. But we are the citizens of wherever the person is living, and we do have the rights to vote. Just because we're not physically there, it is not right for us not to vote. So that was one of the reasons why a lot of youth vote in lower numbers. They also do not trust the government. They don't know the government. They don't know how it works. So there were a lot of questions about why do we not have these kind of things in our education system. We have civic class, which is a 4-month course, half a credit, and we all know that someone did say that it goes from one ear to another, and nobody understands anything. It's just another class, another credit, and nobody understands what the government is about and where we're living. And so that was one problem, and the solution to it was trying to get these young people understand our society and political background from a younger age than we already are learning. Like grade 10, 4 months, I don't think that's enough. I personally don't know a lot of things, or I don't know anything at all about politics. And third question was, what can government and individuals do to turn this around? Realize the importance of politics. Politics affects us on a daily basis. I'm gonna rephrase this whole thing. When we take a when we go in TTC, when we are walking on the streets, anything, it is affecting us every minute on a daily basis. So realizing the importance of politics and learning that we need to vote, the youth needs to vote, even though we don't have a lot of knowledge about it. Maybe one of the ways we can teach ourselves is just go on Google, type up things, and then just learn. But it is very important to know the importance of the government. And also, voting should be easy for you. Like I said, for the first point, if we are not able to, it's not accessible, then we're just gonna be like, oh, okay, I have no time for it. I'm late for a class, so I'm just gonna go and not care about this election because my class is more important. I gotta pay the fees, I gotta go to the class and all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty sure all the topics, like Amber said, it all intertwines, everything's connected to each other. So yeah, that is basically it. Everybody did an amazing